Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and mask-wearing ghosts of little boys. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at The Orphanage. This 2007 supernatural horror from Spain follows a woman named Laura returning to her childhood orphanage with the hopes of starting it up again, bringing her husband Carlos and son Simone along for the ride. All is going well until Simone starts talking with imaginary friends and suddenly disappears, and Laura and Carlos are left to figure out what happened to their boy as more and more strange occurrences take place around the property. It seems there may be more than a few spirits inside this old home, and Laura decides they are her best bet at finding Simone. The Orphanage was directed by J.a Bayona, who has also brought us The Impossible, A Monster Calls, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. This was Bayona's feature film debut, which was written by his soon-to-be frequent collaborator Sergio Sanchez. He also wrote The End, Palm Trees in the Snow, and Bayona's The Impossible before going on to write and direct Marrowbone. Bayona made a lot of alterations to the original script, so many so that the budget had to be doubled along with the film's runtime. Luckily, he was able to receive additional funding from his friend and master of fantasy horror, Guillermo del Toro. The Orphanage stars Belén Rueda from The Sea Inside, The Eyes of Julia, and The Body, Fernando Cayo from Money Heist, The Skin I Live In, and Sky High, Roger Princep from The Blind Sunflowers, Foresters, and Paper Birds, Montserrat Carula from Furrows, Novella, and The Creek, and Geraldine Chaplin from Dr. Zhivago, Nashville, and Talk to Her. Most of the crew consisted of people that Bayona had worked with on shorts and music videos before, and he's continued to work with this crew on most of his projects. The cinematography was handled by Oscar Fuara of Julia's Eyes, The Imitation Game, and A Monster Calls, and the score was composed by Fernando Velázquez of Crimson Peak, Mama, and Devil. Exterior shots were captured in Asturias, with most interior shots being crafted on a soundstage in Barcelona. Bayona actually had all of the cast and crew watch 1961's The Innocents for inspiration, with a particular interest in the cinematography and camera techniques used. The Orphanage premiered at the Cannes Film Festival and received a 10-minute standing ovation, and it went on to become Spain's 5th highest grossing film of all time, with a box office of 78 million. It has received a plethora of awards and nominations, with critics applauding its haunting atmosphere, effective slow burn, and lack of reliance on jump scares. It currently has an 87 and 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's looking pretty consistent. Thank you to my patron, the 4 Mood Groups, for requesting The Orphanage for me to review. I remember seeing the poster and the DVD for it all over the place when I was growing up, but I never got around to watching it. I had no idea the film had so many accolades, so I'm gonna try to lower my now very high expectations. I hope y'all are ready for a scavenger hunt, cause we're watching The Orphanage. The movie opens on some kids playing a variation of red light, green light, without the bullets, and as the happy orphans frolic, we learn one is named Laura and is being adopted. Ooh, I like these opening credits. We jump ahead 30 years where Laura has a sleepy husband named Carlos and a restless son named Simone. She has recently bought her childhood orphanage and moved her family in, and she's reopening it as a facility for disabled children. Simone and his imaginary friends are spooked by this creaky old place, but Laura tells him the old lighthouse emits an invisible beam that will protect them from danger. He still opts to sleep with mom and dad tonight though. Laura expresses some concern about Simone's imaginary friends the following day, but Carlos says he'll forget about them when the real children arrive. Laura takes Simone down to the beach to explore the caves beneath the lighthouse, and it seems the inquisitive lad might be making a friend in there. Laura eventually goes searching for him, and she finds Simone inviting an imaginary boy over to play. He's also sure to leave a seashell path for his new friend to follow. The Riveras are unexpectedly visited by a social worker named Benigna, and it's here we learn that Simone is adopted and HIV positive. Benigna was hoping to have Simone join some kind of medical trial, but given the boy doesn't know about his adoption or illness, Laura quickly sends her away. She locks the secret document away, but something tells me it's not going to stay locked up for very long. That night, Laura follows sounds coming from an old shed and she finds Benigna chilling inside. Then the lady just runs into the night with one of their shovels. She's long gone by the time Carlos comes down, but he agrees that if Benigna returns, they will call the cops. Ah shit, somebody's been adding to the seashell path. Recently reading Peter Pan has left Simone with ideas of running away to Neverland, as well as fearing when his parents will grow old and die. He declares that he'll never grow old, just like his new friends. Uh-oh. Apparently there are 6 of them now, and this kind of thing is on my unreasonable list of fears when it comes to having kids. Of course one has a sack over his head, why the fuck wouldn't he? And Simone explains that they like to steal treasure from people and have them find it. If you solve the scavenger hunt, they'll grant you a wish, and Simone claims his friends have taken some special coins he found and replaced them with his baby teeth. He asks Laura where she kept his baby teeth, predicting the next clue will be hidden there, and there is indeed sand in a little jar. They find more clues in the garden, a sewing box, the chapel, and some Matryoshka dolls, ultimately providing Simone with a key to the kitchen drawer. He is hyped to find his coins, but when he is scolded by Laura, he reveals he knows about his adoption already. His friend Tomas told him he is just like the other parentless kids and that he is going to die soon. Laura and Carlos sit their son down and allow him to ask any questions he'd like, and he immediately asks how long it would take him to die if he stopped taking his medication. Carlos, who is a doctor, explains it would take many weeks before it would affect him, and they promise they will never let anything like that happen to him. The first children have arrived at the home, but Simone refuses to come downstairs until Laura agrees to look at Tomas's home with him. This starts an argument ending with Simone being slapped, and I'm just gonna assume there is a good reason everyone is wearing creepy ass masks. Laura thinks she spots Benigna, but it's a false alarm, but this sack-headed child looks a bit familiar. Laura goes looking for Simone to apologize, but all she finds is Sackhead. The whistly, wheezing child approaches slowly before pushing Laura into the bathroom, smashing her fingers and sending her crashing into the tub. The little hellion locks her in and runs off with the key, and after being found by Carlo, she realizes Simone is missing. Laura clearly worries all of the parents about to leave their kids with her as she frantically searches for him, eventually running out to the cave. She spots someone inside as the tide quickly rises, but Carlos doesn't see anyone and forces her to turn back. Police check the grounds and even send a dive team to search for Simone, and the parents meet with a police psychologist named Pilar. She considers the possibility of Simone being kidnapped by a biological relative, sharing that there is no social worker in the country by the name of Benigna Escobedo. Laura gives a description of the woman, and Pilar promises they will locate her and Simone as soon as possible. Laura's injuries have left her in a wheelchair for a while, and she wonders how anyone could trust her with their children. Carlos lends her his lucky necklace, requesting she return it to him when they find Simone. Laura wakes from an underwater dream to hear something moving around inside the walls, only for it to end with a loud thud and her finding a doll in Simone's bed. A ghostly door takes us 6 months into the future, where the search for Simone has turned into a national, although pretty hopeless affair. At group therapy, Laura admits that she believes Simone's imaginary friends are real and they are still inside of the old orphanage. Other participants share that feeling their child's presence was a part of the grieving process and it will eventually pass, but Laura argues that Simone is not dead and she will find him. While depressed at a traffic light, Laura spots Benigna, only for the old woman to get final destinationed. Luckily, there wasn't a real baby in that stroller, just a cute little sack-faced doll. Carlos is unable to save her, although Laura touching her necklace results in the smashed-up lady grabbing her arm before dying for good. The police identified Benigna and searched her home, finding old photos and Super 8 reels from Laura's time at the orphanage. Turns out Benigna worked there shortly as a young woman, as she had brought her deformed son Tomas to live there. Tomas never removed his mask and was kept away from the other children, at least to the best of the orphanage's ability. Shortly after Laura's adoption, Tomas went missing, and his body was found inside the cave. Some children confessed to luring Tomas to the cave before removing his mask, hoping he would emerge to retrieve it. The poor boy refused to leave the cave though and drowned in the high tide. Laura watches the Super 8 films, eventually getting a look at Tomas under his mask. As Carlos slides into bed, Laura gives a heartfelt monologue about her love for Simone. That is until she realizes she's been chatting with someone else. Laura attends a paranormal lecture on spirits, specifically doppelgangers, which are described as portals to another world. She meets with Professor Leo Balaban and discusses the case, sharing that she ripped a piece of clothing off Tomas during their scuffle. He suggests she bring a medium to the house, and he happens to know a good one. Enter Aurora, who quickly realizes they are not alone here. She requests an old object from the building and also agrees to Pilar joining the festivities. Aurora's technician Enrique sets up several cameras throughout the home, and he explains to Pilar that Aurora is using this doll to enter a trance. He describes it as a psychic summoning of time itself, where past, present, and future superimpose and cross together. Leo speaks to her via headphone to put her in a subconscious state, basically having her mind erase the living from the home. Aurora follows various sounds throughout the orphanage, eventually getting close enough for her mic to pick up the sound of children whispering. She reaches a locked door where the children are crying behind, telling Aurora they are sick. The door opens as the children begin to scream, and Aurora believes the group has been poisoned. The video and sound starts getting funky, and Leo begins to undo the trance, and they find she has made her way to Simone's room. Aurora shares that she envisioned the home as it was during its time as an orphanage, with even the lighthouse beaming through the windows. It was too dark for her to properly identify Simone amongst the other children, and Carlos performs his duty as a husband in a ghost movie to express skepticism about all this. Aurora describes what they overheard as an echo of a wound, a trace left behind due to the severe trauma the children experienced. A message that crosses through time, begging to be heard. Aurora shares that those close to death are more receptive to these messages, so Simone's HIV may have brought him closer to the spirits. Carlos and Pilar continue their cinematic duty to declare this as a farce, but Laura argues that the police have failed to find even a shred of evidence to help them find Simone. Aurora tells her that she has been hearing but not listening, and she will need to truly believe before she can see the truth. Carlos believes they should leave the orphanage, saying these psychics only care about contacting the dead. Whether what they heard was real or not, they can't help find Simone if he is alive. He begs her to come with him to somewhere new, but all Laura wants to do is see her son again. Laura continues talking to the children, who generously smash a window to point her toward a secret stash of dolls. She returns the doll of herself to the group and finds a photo of Simone underneath the toys. Looks like it's time for a scavenger hunt. She finds a rose within her scrapbook, a piece of quilt in the garden, one of Simone's keepsakes in a closet, and a seashell-shaped doorknob in Simone's treasure chest. It doesn't match any of the doors inside the house, leading her to the old shed Benigna was lurking around in. She notices some small hatches and manages to break one down, and after removing many bricks and sandbags from the tunnel, she learns the awful truth. The remains of Martine, Rita, Alicia, Guillermo, and Victor were hidden in this shed for 30 years, as Benigna is the one who killed them. After all, it was their game that got Tomas killed. Carlos still doesn't believe anything relevant to Simone's disappearance is going on here and plans to leave, but he gives her 2 days by herself to say goodbye. Questionable decision at best, Carlos, but you do you. With that pesky man out of the way, Laura can get down to business though. She locates as many furnishings and other objects still around from her childhood to return the orphanage to its original look, even putting this creepy-ass scarecrow back up. Laura picks some blackberries, downs some pills, and rings the bell to invite the ghost kids to her doll dinner. That doesn't result in much outside of frustration though, and she agrees to keep playing their game. She starts a game of red light, green light, which after a few turns proves to be a very successful ghost whispering method. Laura gets tagged and follows Alicia into a closet, which she notices has the same seashell doorknob on the inside. She realizes the wall is actually a secret door, which is where her doorknob came from. She opens it up to find a scary ass stairwell, which has at least one ghost boy running around inside. This is the room that Tomas was kept in, and it's also where she finds Simone. They hear the sound of the scaffolding in the closet falling over, and Simone asks her to stay and play with his friends. She cradles her son and tells him to think of life before they came to the orphanage, as well as all the things he'd like to do in his future. She tells him to close his eyes and this nightmare will be over, but unfortunately quite the opposite happens. Her son is not in her arms, but laying on the floor beneath the stairwell. She recalls him inviting her to Tomas's home and frantically throwing the scaffolding against the wall during her search for him. The banging she heard that first night wasn't a ghost, it was Simone knocking for help before falling to his death. She removes Tomas's mask to confirm the horrible truth, and her screams fill the empty building. Laura starts chugging sleeping pills as she removes Carlos's necklace, and she actually overdoses and dies here. That doesn't mean things are quite over yet though, as she wakes up to find the lighthouse working and the children alive. Well, alive is a relative term. What's up, Mom? Welcome to Purgatory. Simone reminds Laura that the children owe him a wish, and his wish is that she'd stay here and look after all of them together. The gang's all here, even little Tomas, and they are filled with joy when they realize this is their childhood friend. They gather around as Laura tells the story of the lost children, and we jump back to our world as Carlos looks over a memorial for Laura, Simone, and the orphans. He returns to the orphanage and finds his lucky necklace, and he notices a door begin to creak open. He finally understands his family is still with him, and the movie ends with him smiling. And that's The Orphanage. I'm very happy to say my high hopes were not let down. This film has a fantastic atmosphere. I wouldn't say it's really cutting edge or unique, but it's just really effective at building dread. There are a few moments of gore and jump scares, but almost all of the ghostly stuff is lingering in the background, and I always find that more effective. The orphanage itself has a really powerful presence that is felt throughout the film, and it's ultimately the building that got the last laugh. Tomas's first appearance is super creepy, and long shots like the red light green light sequence and Laura's spin around were also very impressive. It's a small detail, but a lot of horror films are bad at displaying the passage of time from scene to scene, but I think The Orphanage did a really good job of visually communicating when big jumps were happening. But it's really the story here that makes The Orphanage stand out. It's just so driven by human emotions. Laura painted such a rosy picture of her past, she decided to revisit it and stay in it, both physically by moving back to the orphanage and spiritually by adopting a child of her own and deciding to reopen it with similar purposes. Whether she forgot or ignored it, Laura failed to see the darker side of the orphanage, and she went through various efforts to try to maintain her happy version of it. The ultimate moral I took away from the story is that you can't spend your life living in the past. But unlike a lot of horror movie protagonists, Laura's setbacks are really centered around her wanting to help people. This is why she refused to give up on Simone when everyone else had, which makes it so much more tragic that this was more or less her fault. There were a lot of moments and tropes in the film that I had seen plenty of times before, but I think The Orphanage is definitely more than just the sum of its parts. A family moving to a new home is the start of about 90% of ghost movies, but the Riveras had a much more important reason than most films provide for being there. The seance sequence was pretty run-of-the-mill, but that climax with the children screaming was a real turning point in the story and super devastating. And I wasn't expecting Simone to come back in one piece, but I was surprised they went full force with his little shriveled up corpse. I was a bit confused about Benigna's character. The police said there were no social workers with her name, so how did she get Simone's adoption file? But generally her unveiling as a murderer was very well done, and I liked that even she was a complex character dealing with really tragic grief. The great character work really drives this film. Even side characters are given enough time on screen to be fleshed out. I should have expected this with Del Toro being involved, but man, this is such a heartfelt horror movie. I'll be completely honest with y'all, when those little ghost kids recognized Laura at the end, I actually got close to tearing up. And that does not happen to me often. This is one of the happiest sad endings I've ever seen. All in all, The Orphanage is a really strong ghost story. It has well-developed characters, haunting cinematography, a mystery that'll keep you guessing, and an emotional ending that might just put a tear in your eye. Thank you again to my patron, the 4 Mood Groups, for requesting The Orphanage for me to review. This has quickly jumped up to being one of my favorite ghost movies of all time. Well, that's about it. Join me in 2 weeks as we check out Ty West's The Sacrament. Thank you all for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of The Orphanage. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support this channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.